Welcome to our tag team talk on Share My Lesson with Kelly Booz, the director of Share My Lesson and e-learning at the American Federation of Teachers. I'm Michael Myers, the managing director at Tag1 Consulting, and we are joined today by Peter Hoyes, Tag1's chief operating officer. This is part two. If you missed part one, our intro and background, please check that out. In this segment, we're going to talk about the rapid growth and how AFT avoided becoming a victim of their own success and was a huge success with their Share My Lesson initiative. And be sure to check out part three, which is building on that success and what's coming up next. Kelly, thank you for joining us. Peter, thank you as well. Really appreciate you guys being here. We want to talk about, one of the biggest challenges in being so successful. And, for the folks who missed the first segment, Share My Lesson is the largest repository of online lesson plans on the internet, serving a really wide audience of people from, parents that are homeschooling their children because of COVID to teachers in private schools and public schools. And when you grow so rapidly, keeping your systems online, keeping up with the influx of information that's coming into the system, there's a lot of challenges that you need to address and face to remain being successful. So, Kelly, were there any early catalysts or initiatives, that propelled SML, to its success? Is this something that built steady over time? Give a sense of, how you guys got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I think some of it even starts from the relationship that, we started with Tag1 and working with you, starting in 2016 timeframe. But, we ended up rebuilding the site on a Drupal platform and, essentially having to rebuild from the ground up, completely redoing it. And that was an intentional decision on our part to shift gears because previously we had created a site that was in partnership with TESS Global, and the American Federation of Teachers and TESS parted ways amicably, largely because TESS went into kind of the fee-based lesson plan area, which is not what the AFT would want to do. So, over the course of the years, over the course of this time, we have been able to really work closely with Tag1 to really envision and make come to life some of our dreams of what we want on the site. And initially when we relaunched the site on a new platform, a lot of it was just making sure that, our teachers could get to what they needed to, because we restructured the UX experience for educators. So there was constant tweakings here. But one key moment where I felt like we're like, wow, we really play a significant role and our site plays a significant role was actually right after the Charlottesville incident in, was it 2017? We pulled together an incredible group of partners, maybe 2 weeks after that incident, which was Facing History in Ourselves, Southern Poverty Law Center, Anti-Defamation League, a couple of educator members, Randy Weingarten, our president, to put together a webinar to just talk about and unpack a lot of the issues that happened as part of that Charlottesville incident, whether it was race and hate. And, I think that the title of it was When Hate is in the Headlines. And, and we also had incredible collections of resources on racism and anti-racism and, resources on social justice issues and stuff like that. So all of a sudden, that's really when I feel like a moment where the catalyst moment where I just saw, wow, people are really hungry for some of this hard to teach content. But we also, with these great partnerships that we have, we're able to really pull together some resources for educators.
So current events, public events. I know that Randy's a really well-known public figure. We were watching CNN the other day, and my wife was like, "Randy's on TV." We see her on TV all the time. Are there, events like Randy going on TV that will generate a burst of traffic?
Yeah, it's especially since COVID hit and schools closed. When Randy goes on and does interviews and is talking about resources that are out there both for educators and for teachers, and when she mentions Share My Lesson, and particularly in this new kind of world that we're in, we saw we see some significant spikes on the site and new users coming to find content that we have on the site.
Okay. So we've talked about current events and public appearances. What about, other initiatives that you do, that help sort of promote and drive traffic to the site?
Yeah, and so I mean, the webinars that we do have been incredibly well attended and valuable. But another moment after the Charlottesville incident, we were approached by a partner to partner on doing a webinar with Steven Spielberg talking about Schindler's List. It was a 25th anniversary of Schindler's List, and that was another moment of like, wow, we've made it now. If we get to have Steven Spielberg, on a webcam with us, that's pretty exciting. But we also, we've been doing another thing that's been incredibly successful for us, and we use Share My Lesson as the, conference homepage for all of these different events. But we do a virtual conference each year. In fact, we'll be doing our 9th virtual conference this March 23, 24, 25 timeframe. And I like to say that the virtual conference is something you can do in your PJs, but that's become like, that everybody's been in their PJs for the last year. So now I say we've been doing virtual conferences before it was the hip and cool thing to do. But, that is a complete traffic driver for our site, because we're working with organizations and partners, and everybody is co-promoting the conference and their resources together. And that is a 3-night over 40 different webinars that we do. Each webinar is open for a certificate or professional development certificate that if a teacher's school district will accept it, they can get credit for their continuing education that they need to do to keep their teacher certification live. But another kind of like being in the right place at the right time moment for us. And, back to that Randy question about, her going on TV. Last year, our virtual conference, for whatever reason, we scheduled it March 24, 25, 26. We normally do it at the very beginning of March. So go back in timeline during when COVID shut things down on March 13th. All of a sudden, we have a virtual conference that was already in the books and scheduled a week and a half after, the entire world shuts down. And so because, it's a conference we've already done, our presenters were really able to shift gear quickly to take the content that they were already going to teach and talk about how you can tweak it for more of this like digital learning, distance learning, remote learning environment. And we went from, the previous year, which was, record shattering for us, having 22,000 registrations to over 70,000 registrations last year. And so that's been a sweet spot for us just because we can pull such great people. This year, we had well over 100 proposals for only 40 slots. We've got PBS and Disney, and, Randy obviously will be presenting, and, we've been approached by some incredible organizations that will be, bringing content to us, to our members and AFT members.
Wow. I mean, this was already an amazing resource. During the time of COVID, it's so invaluable to, folks that are teaching, remotely for the first time, and dealing with topics that, for the first time.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody was struggling. I've got now a kindergartner and a second grader that have been learning exclusively virtually. And so how do you, balancing supporting them in their learning environment and then also working full time, and especially in the spring when there really wasn't, regular, virtual school for my then first grader. I was going to Share My Lesson to find content and resources to help support her, so she didn't lose everything that she had already gained from her first grade year that, abruptly ended March 13th. So, we had a lot of folks that were able to discover us, but I think the exciting thing is how much we've been able to build on Share My Lesson to be in a place that we have such an incredible tool that we're in the right space again at the right time. And we've been building for this over the course of the years with you guys as, our partners, to create a resource that not only, teachers who've been coming to us, but now a huge audience of parents too, of content that they can find to help. So, whether it's distance learning or health and wellness. I mean, that's a huge thing right now for educators. In fact, while we still do our professional development with continuing education units, we are now also doing just wellness and health series. So on Wednesday of this coming week, we're doing a yoga session. We've done a Zumba session. We've done meditation, so we're just saying, hey, educators, let's come together and, let's exercise our minds and our bodies together. And it's been incredibly valuable because people are stressed out right now.
I was just thinking, I could use that health and wellness class.
Me too. I tell you what, I don't mind working Wednesday nights because I moderate the wellness session, and I'm like, I get to work out while I'm doing this. This is kind of cool. I get to come in a t-shirt and yoga pants, but let's be clear, I've been wearing yoga pants for the last year, so that's not new. But
to me, this is one of the biggest success pieces of what's happened over the last couple of years is, it's not just about responsiveness and sort of sifting the cream of the crop kinds of lesson plans or PD for a particular event or time or subject matter. But, ultimately it's when you think about, K through 12 and higher ed, when you look at grades and topics, that's a very large taxonomy of stuff, and having people sift through that to find good stuff. AFT themselves make it easier because they curate some of it for you and say, here, this is the best of the best for this topic. But even during these particular events like COVID last year, having to deal with subjects that are, I like the word orthogonal to those subjects and grades, and being able to create those kinds of, big topical areas that people can still get organized content. That's been a large part of what AFT has been doing over this last year. And we're trying to find even easier ways for them to allow people to slice and dice it, not just with search, which is huge, but also through communities that specialize in a particular topical area, or, breaking them down into other sections of the site that make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like when we've all these new features that we've added to the site since we, launched with you in 2016, we've added a lot of resources and functionality to share my lesson. No, none of us thought about okay, there's going to be a pandemic. We need it, to work like this. But we have had, didn't have any of that foresight by any means. But I think a lot of the decisions that we've made and the updates that we've made on the site have been super helpful to where we are today in the world. And, fortunately, this is, a big commitment of the AFT, and it's big, and Randy Weingarten's such a supporter of it. So we're able to, think through what can we do and how can we make it better. It's not just, okay, we made a website, wash my hands, I'm done, walk away. We're constantly, just like educators, we're constantly looking at it and saying, okay, how can we do this better? How do we make it easier? How do we make it, relevant? Gosh, it would be really great if we could do this. In those first couple of years when we launched and relaunched the site in 2016, there was a lot of, cleanup that we had to do, not necessarily cleanup, but there were some things that just weren't functioning the right way. Or, we had some missteps in terms of SEO and making sure the search engine optimization, and making sure that when the site was launched that we were doing the right thing to make sure that our, site stayed relevant within SEO, because it's great if you build a great site, but nobody can find it. That's always a challenge. So we had to make tweaks, but I like to say now that we're in this really sweet spot where we, have been able to do some super cool things that we've always wanted to do.
Yeah, you guys are in the driver's seat now. You've really, been able to get on top of the growth, to drive success. I'm curious, when you started to see a lot of success, what are the things that happened that, the site didn't anticipate? I would imagine all of a sudden you're getting a lot of lesson plans, a lot more than the system was ever designed to handle. So, there's features and functionality you want, and then there's things that it's like, oh my gosh,
Now what do I do?
Yeah. How did you guys handle, what were some of those unforeseen, problems that arose from such, a rapid influx of information and people, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, I mean, some things I think that every site deals with, and, like ours, where people can create accounts and add content and comment on stuff, so I think this is a common experience of just making sure there's some spam protocols in place. because that was a challenge that we've, still are checking in and overcoming and having to put some guardrails there. As we become more popular, seems like people want to be able to sell their keto diet supplements or whatever. So, there's that component.
There's also the aspect of trying to tag content.
Yep.
Because this is you already have a really large taxonomy. People, that you're crowdsourcing stuff. So you want them to have flexibility, but you want to make it easy for them to do that because, a particular subject or subtopic and can fly across lots of grades or even multiple subject areas sometimes. So making it easy for people to do that, but also easier for administrators of the site that are dealing with hundreds of thousands of pieces of content to be able to, check some of that stuff, and even sometimes auto tag things with like Common Core standards, which we use some AI machine learning third-party tools to help look at the way that content might get tagged and then get pushed to the AFT administrators to check, yes, this follows this standard. That's actually been a pretty big aspect of managing not just the million plus bodies that are on the site, but also the hundreds of thousands of assets that are there.
Yeah, and I think some of it is, that the adding the ability for a user to add state standards in the 4 core subject areas or common core national standards, state standards, or the next generation science standards was a big thing. But there was a huge concern that if we open this up, because in the previous site, while we would add standards, it was all manual and we would do it. But the doing manual standards, adding manual standards takes time, and that's not really scalable when you have a smaller staff. So we wanted to add the ability for users to be able to tag their resources to their individual standards, whether, I live in Virginia. So whether it was to a Virginia standard of learning or to, a California standard or to the national standards. But then not only that, there's a relational, the Virginia standard of learning may be related to the standard that's in North Carolina and that same kind of social studies area. So, allowing those relations of a resource that I've added for Virginia to be showing up for a teacher who's looking for that a very similar standards in North Carolina was a value. The concern, however, was, okay, well, what if, somebody adds these resources and they tag them to standards? How do we know that they are really, truly aligned to those standards? Because that's standard aligned resources, and resources are important for educators and really, frankly, also really mostly important for school administrators to say, like, okay, are we teaching based on our pacing guide and based on, our individual state standards? So one of the things we did is we allowed users to add their content tagged to those individual standards, but then we have another layer where we have a team of cadre that will review resources that have been added and tagged to the standards, and then we can verify that that resource is actually not only quality, but it's also, really truly aligned to the right standard. So it's a little bit of a catch that we added, so we can scale more with the standards alignment, but then also have some guardrails in effect, if somebody adds something to say, yeah, no, this is really good, this is quality, or not give that stamp of approval, essentially.
And dovetailing
Awesome.
on that actually is the relationship to doing more personalization, because again,
Exactly.
lots of resources trying to figure out how to get someone the things that are most relevant to them based on their profile information or the things they explicitly say they're interested in.
Yeah, and that was a big update that we did, because before, whether if I was a science teacher in middle school, I'd have the exact same experience as somebody who's an art teacher in high school on the site. Our emails, everything was, the same messaging was going. It was not personalized. We weren't in a position to really do a whole lot of targeted marketing with our content. And to some degree, that's always was an intentional decision in terms of how people create accounts on Share My Lesson. We wanted the barrier for somebody to get on Share My Lesson and get their content to be super easy and low. So at the registration on Share My Lesson, we don't ask for subject or grade. We ask for first name, email, and zip code, and that's essentially it. problem with that is if we want to grow and really want to personalize, we really need that, that information in terms of who our users are. Are you a middle school science teacher or are you a high school art teacher? So the personalization was a key that I, would like to say it's kind of like a combination of like LinkedIn meets Netflix, effect, or even Facebook to some degree, because you would create your account and then every time you come back in, you're prompted to say, hey, do you teach this? What are you interested in these grades? Where do you teach? So really there's kind of a constant drumbeat as you come back in to complete your profile. And then there's also the ability for users now to follow other users or follow partner organizations. And then by doing so, doing those following, you'll not only get notified based on your grade and your subject of resources that are relevant and in your kind of grade and subject areas. So now I'm science, middle school science teacher receiving science resources when I log in and when I get emails. But I also can get notifications from, an organization. So National Science Foundation has awesome content on our site. National Science Foundation or NBC Learn partners with the National Science Foundation on a lot of stuff. They have awesome content on the site. So if as a follower of them, if they're adding new content, I'll get notified to say, oh, this is great content.
I love this use of guardrails, checks and balances, coupled with technology to make it easier for people to create content, for you to check the content, for them to find the content. That's a really great example of, how you scale a site. Outside of these, scalability and volume challenges, how did the site itself grow and evolve? Were there, with all of these new users and features, were there new needs that arose, and, and how did you address these?
Yeah, one of the things one of the things that actually was frankly always a dream of ours to do, and that we were, able to do finally, was to create communities on the site. So, we always wanted a place where, let's say I'm a social studies teacher, I could join a community of other social studies teachers and find great content to social studies and be able to share stuff with other social studies. Or let's say, I went to this incredible summer learning professional development institute. And one of the things that I needed to be able to do was to create lesson plans and materials as part of, the project in the summer. We wanted to be able to have a place that somebody could create either an open or closed community where users could add their content and be able to share and comment and discuss different components. So we launched communities, and we launched communities, I think it was in 2019. And I'll definitely say that, the communities, especially now, our distance learning community, our wellness community that we have on the site, some of the stuff that we're seeing currently have been very helpful and valuable because we're able to, within those pages, within those communities, share content that a lot of folks have been looking for. And then there's been a lot of sharing of ideas too within the discussion board.
So I would say there's probably one other scaling challenge that, is always there, and it's always a constant sort of push forward, and that's around search. Besides adding, faceted search and expanding that so that people could narrow focus a little better, we're also, looking at and forward to ways to make search, more relevant, or allow people to do better at sort of choosing,
Mhm.
is it, user rating versus true relevancy versus, date on something. But search in and of itself is always an ongoing, feature enhancement, because it's probably the first thing that people go to when they want to find geometry lessons for a particular grade.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even doing some of the user testing that I know Tag1 was doing as we're, working on some more updates for the site. One of the common things that they heard, it doesn't surprise me, is that they use the search bar. That was some of the surveys that we've asked too. to get to that content. I mean, Google, my gosh, how often are they updating their search and their, how that works in their world. Their entire world is based on search and serving up content. So yeah, we do have to constantly tweak that to make sure that we getting the right stuff to people as easily as possible.
Kelly, Peta, thank you guys so much for joining us for this second segment. I think everybody wants their initiative to be successful. And when you are lucky enough and fortunate enough to achieve that success, to stay on top of it and to continue to be successful is even more challenging than sometimes than achieving that success. And so it's really great to be able to share some of the things that you did. And next up, we're going to talk about building on this success, where you guys are going from here. All the links that we mentioned are going to be posted online in the show notes. If you like this talk, please remember to upvote, subscribe, and share it with all your friends. You can check out past Tag1 Team Talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks. And as always, we would love your feedback and input. Let us know if there are more topics that you'd like to hear us talk about. Reach us at tagteamtalks@tag1.com. Again, a big thank you to Kelly and Peta for joining us. We'll be back soon. Thank you.